Hola, and welcome to Vive Nutrition Radio, the first ever Spanglish podcast where you will hear interviews with the top minds in nutrition, performance, fitness, and health in both English and Spanish. Here is your host, expert registered dietitian, Andres Ayesta, on a mission to help you take your nutrition to the next level. Hope you're ready for this. Let's dive right in.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. This is probably the first one recorded on 2020 Vive Nutrition Radio. This is a very impromptu episode, and I have the pleasure and the privilege to have two of my great friends and colleagues on the podcast, Toni Marinucci and Antonio Castillo. What's going on, guys? Happy New Year. What's going on with you two?
Happy New Year.
Woo! Happy New Year! Excited to be here.
Yeah, you guys
get confusing with two Tonys.
Our voices sound similar, so don't worry.
Toni with a Y, Toni with a Y, and Toni with an I. So we're just gonna. But you guys know who Antonio is. He's been on the podcast before, so I'm sure his voice and enthusiasm and energy sound familiar. And Toni has been. Oh, have you been on my podcast before?
The roundtable.
The roundtable. Now we need to bring you on, on a solo episode to.
I would love that.
Stories. But why don't you? I guess because everybody knows about Antonio, so they know your background. But I guess we can definitely talk about you, Toni, because you have some big things coming up this year, and I know you're doing a TED Talk. And is it less than a month?
Yeah, my heart just pounded. Actually, just jump into the screen. It's a month from it's on February 13th. So we're recording this a little bit before that in January.
Awesome. Are you excited?
I am. I actually, today the first half I think is pretty solid. I still have to finish the second half, which is crazy. I haven't even finished the whole talk yet, but I'm trying not to force it too. So
yeah, just let it roll and let it flow, right?
Yeah.
That's exciting. And what have you been up to, Antonio?
Oh, just getting over the flu, man. So just taking a lot of ginger shots, eating as many vegetables as I can, living my best life, but still dancing every day. Dancing my way into the new year, man.
That's awesome, dude. And hydrating or dehydrating, right? With Captain Hydrate right next to you, huh?
Only way to do it.
That's awesome. Well, I brought you guys in today as an impromptu episode because I figured that for people listening in as they start in the new year, I call January National Motivation Month because it's when everybody is excited about a clean slate and starting something new. And of course, it would be kind of cool to talk about what not to do, some of the biggest lessons that we learned in 2019. And I figured the best way to talk about this was breaking down nutrition myths that actually came from, these are not new. I feel like they keep kind of rolling into a new year over and over, but then it keeps piling up on new ones. So we can maybe dissect down some of the craziest ones, some of the not so crazy ones, and then maybe discuss whether or not they're a myth and what's the reality and in your opinions as you deal with obviously your own clients and you're obviously teaching and coaching a lot of people on a daily basis. Perhaps we can kind of dive not too in depth into each one of these because I want to make sure I go through all of them, but then it's more the typical questions that you get asked all the time by maybe clients or people in a social gathering on I need to cut out dairy, or I need to cut this out or that, or whatever it may be the case. So we're going to dissect down some of those myths, and I figured that'd be a fun topic of conversation. Sound good to you guys?
Yeah.
Woo! Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So let's see if you guys come up with any, and I have a few lists on here, but why don't we kind of talk about some of the typical ones that you kind of hear all the time and see if we can kind of cross it off the list on here. Antonio, what you got, bro?
Well, new year, new me. Just finished drinking all night, right? So let's talk about detoxes. That's always my favorite when people hop on here and they're like, all right, it's going to be new year, new me. I'm going to start off by doing a 3-day, 5-day, week-long juice cleanse.
Yep, that's a great one. So right? Should you? Did you do one?
Absolutely not. I would not do one nor recommend it. Toni Marinucci, what are your thoughts on a juice cleanse?
I wouldn't either. I'm sure you've covered this before on your podcast, Andres, but I'm also sure you probably have new listeners. But our bodies naturally detoxify us as long as we feed it well, nutrition, balanced meals on a regular basis. Our liver will do its job, our kidneys will do its job, our skin, our lungs, every part of our body. As long as we treat it well regularly, it'll naturally quote unquote detox us.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's that's one of the ones that I had on here on my list. And yeah, it's obviously that obsession with I I'm going to trash my body, and then I'm going to detox it. Kind of like we're just some sort of like, we are a machine. It's like perfectly, balanced machine. But at the same time, people don't really understand that we have our own kind of like our artillery and our own kind of organs. They are in charge of detoxifying the things. And that's kind of like the most important part. And now if we get more into like the science of aspect of things, like, and I'm quoting here someone like we're doing this podcast based on a great article that examine.com actually posted very recently. But one of the things here, and I quote, a 2009 investigation of 10 companies found that they couldn't name a single toxin that was eliminated by one of their 15 products, let alone prove that their products actually worked. Mm-hmm. So the truth is that, again, like a bunch of those companies that have like all this fancy products that you're going to detoxify this toxin and that toxin, they really investigated really what was that toxin that they were trying to eliminate, and they couldn't find anything. So of course, not only are you spending and wasting time on completely useless products, but at the same time, there's not really a specific toxin that your body is eliminating. Does that make sense? That's kind of crazy to think about that, because there's a lot of money to be made in that industry.
It really is just making you use the bathroom.
Well, not only
we're not talking about Captain Hydrate.
Well, and that's a really
we're talking about number 2.
And that's a really interesting point, because that actually goes into the safety part, because detox diets not always necessarily safe. And now, like, they obviously become famous because of what do you think they become famous? Because of the rapid weight loss that people experience, right? I think that's how the way I kind of see it is like, oh my God, this detox diet was amazing. I lost like 20 pounds on it. And, when in reality, what are they really doing? Cutting out a bunch of crap out of their diet, which, it's going to be a pretty common denominator in a lot of the myths that we're going to be discussing today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it was like on a late night talk show I saw, they like went around and they were like, hey, what does a GMO stand for? And people would just be like, so I'm sure if you went around asking people like what toxin, you could probably pull up like an Instagram influencer that says some BS toxin, but that juice cleanse that you're doing is not gonna clear that body of that toxin.
Yeah, I think that's agreed. So I guess that we can agree that the truth behind this myth is going to be just don't necessarily do it. Like, focus on more sustainable health habits, adding a lot of like nutritious foods. There are foods that are going to help your body naturally detoxify things, including a lot more vegetables, a lot more, cruciferous, like, the veggies, and adding like more like fiber into everything, just more color overall. And I feel like that's going to be for you guys listening and thinking about doing that sort of detox that, it's going to magically going to help you achieve a specific goal, or like getting rid of all the toxins, quote unquote, from like the holidays. Just don't. I think that's not a good way to go about it. Number 1 is covered. What's number 2? Toni, you got any?
I'm sure. I feel like we talk about this all the time, so I don't want to be like annoying to your listeners if they've already heard this.
No, because like I feel like we say it so often, but at the same time,
people
need to hear it like repeatedly, and that's I think the problem that exists. So yeah, so which one?
I'll give you an example of what someone was just talking to me about earlier today. Not a client, just like a follower. And she's like, I know my problem's snacking. That's what I need help with. So I said, okay, tell me what you eat in the day. And she basically described her meals where everything was like high protein, high vegetables, no carbohydrates, and she keeps snacking. So I said, is it okay if I share this with you? But I don't think the problem's snacking. I think the problem is that you're not eating enough like whole grain carbohydrates and starchy vegetables and like starches to help satisfy those cravings to limit the fact that you keep going to just snacking on anything you can get your hands on.
Yeah, so that leads to myth number 2, right? Carbs are bad for you. And that is a good one. So carbs they're being placed a huge X on it, specifically like, people on the keto world. And obviously, did you guys know that actually what is keto was one of the most searched key phrases in Google, like, period, like not even like just in nutrition. It was in like all Google, like the top most searched like things in 2020 and 2019 was what is keto. So of course with that, there's going to be a lot of fear that comes with carbs. Now, what is the truth? Antonio, what do you think? Are carbs inherently bad for you?
Absolutely not. I absolutely love carbs. And I see you sipping on a Zevia right there, staying semi-hydrated.
Semi-hydrated.
They gotta send you a sponsorship, man. But carbs, I absolutely love them. I actually used to be a big carb fear. I used to be scared of carbs in the sense that I didn't want them because you got rapid weight loss, right? Like, I remember once during spring break, I didn't eat carbs the whole week before the cruise just because I wanted to look good for the cruise, right? And yeah, I lost rapid weight, but as soon as I got on that cruise and had my first drink and had like a burger from the buffet, bam, got it right back. So it's not true weight loss, and that's what I don't like about it. And also, carbs fuel us through our workouts. All three of us are active individuals, and we all eat carbs. And I can 100% say carbs are not bad for you. If anything, they give you fuel to work throughout the day and be our best selves, not only for our clients, but also make our clients be the best they can be for their families, their loved ones, and themselves.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times, like the fear that comes out of carbs obviously comes from like the the chronic, conditions and diabetics. And there's some truth into some things as far as like, carbohydrates, but I believe it all comes down to moderation and understanding what's like the right amounts. And in fact, like there's this thing called like the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity, which, basically the theory behind it is like, because you eat carbs, there's more insulin spikes, and because there's more insulin spikes, there's just more, it can conduct obviously chronic conditions that are related to elevated blood sugar levels, which in reality that has not been well supported by evidence, again, according to some of the research that is pulled here from examine.com. So really it's something that is not well supported, usually is what the keto or like the low carb fanatics usually kind of cling on to prove their points. There is some validity to some of the things that are explained, but I feel like it all comes down to moderation and understanding how carbohydrates are going to be part of a bigger picture, and how, if you're eating way too much carbs, you're a very inactive person, maybe that's something that is not going to help you. But if you're a very active person and you need those carbohydrates for fueling purposes, of course, that's going to be conducive to good things. That's the kind of way I look at it. And I feel like people are just so afraid and fear, like they just feel carbohydrates that are automatically going to turn into fat cells, which is not true. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes into it. Anything that you wanted to share, Toni, on that end? Yeah,
just that it's more so, I think there are some people that might be eating too many carbs. And so now we identify that is an area where they need to cut back. But for whatever reason, when someone hears something they need to cut back or something super good for them, it's like cut back, they hear cut out. And when they hear something's good for you, they think like, oh, I have to have hundreds of it. I have to have multiple, like so much of it. And it's like, I didn't say cut out. I said cut back. And I said, like slowly add in, not like that's all you
don't twist my words.
So I think that most people might be eating the wrong types of carbohydrates, maybe more refined like sugars, and they're eating them and drinking, they're maybe not even eating them. They're probably drinking them through like soda or juices or ways, fancy like coffee beverages and whatever and stuff like that. Or like snacks, because they're not having things like a sweet potato or oatmeal, or quinoa with their meals. And so now they're having like cookies and candy. And we know that isn't inherently bad, but it's the amount that they're eating in absence of what they're not getting enough of.
Yeah, I think it's the truth. It's like it's overindulging on the wrong type of carbohydrates, in too large quantities. Not even saying like eating a cookie is not necessarily bad for you, but then even 10 cookies and not consuming any kind of fiber in the day, which, right. For people listening in, like, fiber is a type of carbohydrate, and you need to, like, it's not all carbs are created equal, and people need to understand that difference that exists between them. So no, carbohydrates are not bad for you. The truth is you can have them. You can still achieve results in them. And it all also comes down to looking at the bigger picture. Are you obviously creating a calorie deficit? If, for example, weight loss or fat loss is your goal in this process. And I feel like that's kind of like a way to people need to start to look at it.
That was a really good point. If I could just add quickly, because fiber is really important. And when you eliminate carbohydrates, you eliminate the amount of fiber that you're able to take in. And then if you're in a caloric deficit, you're going to be hungry all the time. And it's going to be staying in that caloric deficit really challenging. But if you can stay in that caloric deficit longer to a point where you actually see results, but also feeling satisfied, like that's what's going to help you stay in it. Yeah. Otherwise, that's why people can't stick to low carb or no carb, because it's like they're hungry all the time, or they're just like, it's not, we know that it's not sustainable social wise and all that stuff, but like on a physical level, like they're going to be hungry and tired.
Yeah, I agree. So I think it all comes down to how you're choosing those things, and
Right.
specifically carbs, and what is like the right balance that needs to exist between all that. So that's the second one. Yeah, that's a typical one that we get all the time. All right, I guess it's my turn now.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Come on, Andres, do something here, all right? Stop living off our coattails.
Well, this is going to be one that is going to probably gather a lot of different myths into one, which is red meat is bad for you. Yeah, so that's a typical one. So you guys seen I'm sure you all seen the documentary The Game Changers on Netflix. I did a podcast very recently about it. So, but obviously we can kind of go on many tangents on this, but what are your thoughts on red meat being bad for you?
Don't everyone jump at once.
I'll just say right off the bat, I think it kind of goes into the same situation with the carbs, is that sometimes people might be eating too much red meat or too much processed meat and not enough lean cuts of protein, and therefore it could contribute to their calories. It could be the fact that they're not eating enough vegetables or whole grain starches, so not enough fiber. So it's usually like multifactorial, but I think it kind of goes to show that like there's no one thing that's good or bad for you. It really has to do with like it's all encompassing. And so I think red meat just has this, and there's a whole other things of like how it's raised and all that, but that's like you said, I'm glad you did a documentary. You did a podcast episode about the documentary, because there's a lot of myths there too. But from a nutrition level, sometimes it tends to be higher in fat, but then if you get a lean cut, it's actually a great piece of protein, because there's great sources of iron, vitamin B12, and ones that are more absorbed than something like chicken that has like this, like everyone loves chicken, which is great. I love chicken too. But like there's nothing wrong with having a lean cut of beef.
Yeah, I agree. Antonio, what are your thoughts on this?
100% agree that red meat is amazing. If anything, I talk to my clients, especially my active ones, to get it at least twice a week because of iron. I have a lot of people that run, and that foot strike can cause you actually to use more iron in your body. So you actually need to have more than what you have. I do have some vegetarian clients and vegan clients, right? So how can we get them to get that non-heme iron, or iron that's not in red meat? So making sure they pair it with vitamin C and things like that. But I'm all about red meat. It's got, like Tony said, B12, iron. It tastes good. Get me some filet mignon. Your boy's all about it, all right?
No, I agree. And I think a lot of times, like the most of like the fears that come with red meat consumption, they come out of the correlations that exist with cancer. That's one. That's, one of the main areas. And some people, obviously, I was having a conversation. I was in Miami this weekend and meeting with one of my friends, and she said, well, I watched a documentary, The Game Changers, and which we were talking about it, but she just said, yeah, true. I'm not going to go vegan. I don't believe in everything that was said there, but I do agree that I do want to cut out red meat a little bit because I was consuming too much, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And she said, well, I started cutting it out and I actually felt a little bit better. So how do you combat some of those things? So if it's making you feel better, does it mean that it was bad for you? Not necessarily, but my response was well, it probably wasn't related to the fact that maybe you were consuming way too many calories because you were consuming way too much meat. Yes, red meat will have more calories than, for example, a piece of chicken or a piece of fish. So there's obviously other side things that come along you consuming a lot of red meat, but it's not necessarily because the red meat itself. And I think that, again, a lot of that fear that comes of cancer is caused by consumption of red meat. That has been obviously there's a lot of research that's shown it doesn't really mean red meat consumption equals to cancer. There are compounds and processed and cooked meats, specifically, and I quote in here, one of the ones that they have is they call it PAH, which it stands for polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are found in smoked meats, whatever that means. And basically they have been shown to damage certain parts and certain components of your cell. But the thing about that is consumption in a lot of huge amounts, obviously that is not something that you normally do, unless obviously you have if you have a moderate consumption of red meat, you exercise regularly, you eat your fruits and vegetables, you do all the right things, you can consume, like you said, Tony, 1 to 2 servings of red meat per week, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think that's like part of it that most people need to take away from this.
Yeah, well, also too, just to kind of back off that, like even just using your grill, or I don't want to like make people be afraid to use your grill, but like when you're barbecuing, that is helping. What is that? It's carcinogenic, to be honest. Yeah. It actually is. So like, but we know that also, I mean, not for nothing, what do you put in your hair? What lotions do you use? Like there's when you walk around in the air, the pollution, like there's certain things that we can't, if we obsess over that, the stress of that will bring us to having cancer. So it's like, there's the reasons why we have to have a protection, and the protection is eating vegetables, is walking, is sleeping, is stress management, because there's not one thing. So, and it's not also like, it have to be the quantity, going back to the quantity.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I think, you don't, going into 2020, you don't have to cut out your red meat. Then you're going to have the people that are going to be on the side of like, well, but because of sustainability and because of like, the environment. And I think we're not going to go down that path too much. I'm actually going to bring in on a podcast, her name is Diana. She is, I think she has an account called Sustainable Dish, and she talks about how red meat consumption is not the problem. The environment is obviously about farming practices and all kinds of stuff like that. But, that'll be a subject for another conversation. But just because you eat, red meat doesn't mean that you're actually not helping the environment. There's a lot more that goes into that. So I think that's going to be a key thing. We have another myth in here, which is going to be eating too often will boost your metabolism. That is another big one that we get all the time in 2019. Thoughts, arguments, opinions. What do you got? Not at all at once.
Again, we're 2 for 2 on everyone jumping in on this. Tony, you want to go first? I would like to give it to.
It's more about the whole thing with meal frequency. That you have to eat every 2 to 3 hours a day to be able to. Metabolism.
It basically brings you to the point of like, some people when they eat more frequently they tend to not overeat, whereas other people they eat more frequently and they actually do overeat.
Yeah.
So it's nothing to do with the metabolism. It's some strategies that's more of an effective method for some, and for others not so much. So it depends on the goal. So obviously, if someone's trying to speed up their metabolism, I'm just going to assume they're trying to lose weight. It really does go back to that caloric deficit. Obviously, the way in which you achieve that caloric deficit actually matters, like we just discussed, like balancing your macronutrients. And then some people do well with like small frequent meals, and some people do better with just like 3 large meals or 2 meals and like a snack or whatever it is. Like that's what's so cool about nutrition, is you can make it individualized to you.
Yeah, it's a personal preference thing, right?
Yeah. I will say that like, I do work with a lot of people who have issues with bowel movements. And when they do start their day with breakfast, they tend to have more normal bowel movements. So you could argue that like it is speeding up the metabolism a little bit, but that's just eating itself. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that it's because they have frequent meals, but that is one observation I've had with like a few people over the years.
Gotcha.
I agree. You got to find what works for the people you work with. I'm a big proponent of having people eat every 3 to 4 hours, but not because their metabolism is kicked up. It's because research shows that it's going to keep muscle preservation on. So there's like a light switch in your body that turns on every 3 to 4 hours. And that's something we educate our clients on. So if that's something that can fit in their schedule and that will work, then let's go. If not, I know Andres is a big fan of fasting. There's his smile. There it is. Thanks for showing some teeth, baby.
I knew you were gonna go there.
You knew it, huh?
I'll give my thoughts.
You know I was going to come in, right? Anyways.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's a myth on there that like intermittent fasting is like the only way or something like that.
Yeah, maybe we can pair this up because usually they kind of go hand in hand. No, but I do agree with both of you guys. And I think there's obviously some truth and validity into all this. It all comes down to obviously what's a personal preference and what works best for somebody. So in my opinion, and from, what I have seen in a lot of my clients and from the research, you're right. Like, when Antonio says about, protein timing more so than meal timing for me is most important, because I feel like what research shows is correct. The if you have like controlled feedings throughout the day of a specific amount of protein, you're able to maintain, preserve, and even build more muscle mass as a result, which is ideal, specifically for people that are active and that are doing resistance training, all these different things. And with increasing protein feedings, you also control more your hunger levels, which is great. Now, it all comes down to preference, because when somebody comes to me and says, I just don't feel hungry in the morning, in the past, I would just force them and say, eat breakfast, try to have breakfast. And sometimes it worked out well, but now I try not to do that. And I do think that breakfast has a very important aspect of things. But then at the same time, if I see that this person is not really overeating the rest of the day, it creates a very unhealthy balance in what he's consuming, and he just needs to fix that. But he just doesn't really have a huge appetite in the morning, I don't usually make him or her do that. I just simply say, how can we organize your nutrition on a daily basis just to make sure that you have proper timing to feed your needs on a daily basis. So I think it's a matter of personal preference, but I think we all agree on this conversation that it doesn't really, quote unquote, boost your metabolism. It doesn't make you burn more fat daily. I think the reason why that argument comes around is because when you consume a meal, you're increasing what we call the thermic effect of food. It's like that calories that are burned through like the digestive and food. And what's being shown over and over, it doesn't really account for a significant change to say you're going to lose more weight because you're burning more calories of eating more often. It doesn't really work that way. So that's, I think, the best way to explain it.
And one of the things that I talk about with my clients when it comes to like doing the fasting part of it is just, what is your diet history? So personally, I used to be a big binge eater, so I would just sit and eat and eat and eat. So when I did intermittent fasting, I would literally time it until that like minute, and then I would just eat as much as possible. Like I would have like a whole pizza, I'd have like a burrito lined up after that, then I'd have a burger and fries, and then I would feel super guilty and not do it the correct way. So finding someone that can kind of guide you if that's what you're going to do, but also knowing your diet history, because one of my clients I just signed on is like, oh, let's talk about fasting. And I'm like, tell me about your diet history. And he told me he knows he would go and binge eat. I'm like, then we should probably not do intermittent fasting, because that's just going to trigger and get you back on the old track, and that's not going to help us in the long term.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that obviously it's a very personal thing, and as long as like you educate the person, or for you guys listening, and if this is you and you're trying to consider, well, I should do fasting, or I should do this, or should I be consuming food every 2 to 3 hours? Like maybe this is something that work well for you. So another example here, I literally had a client last night, and I told her she eats every 2 to 3 hours and very small snacks, but she struggles at nighttime because she just feels that like she still needs to be continue to eat. So she eats sometimes like 6 to 8 times a day. So I said, you know what, let's just try this thing of maybe you pairing some of those snacks with your main meals and see how you feel. Maybe your satiety is different. Maybe something is different. So let's just try that out and see how it works. So she's trying out this week and see how, maybe how things are going to change. But it all comes down to, again, personal preference. So that's a good one. I do have one here that is great, and because I hear it all the time. I'm sure you guys have in the past. In fact, we did, Antonio and I, we did a video on this in the Yesik series. But this one is, to lose fat, don't eat before you go to bed. And the way we kind of did this, the way we did this when we did this Yesik video was, Yesik just basically said, and for those of you guys listening in that you have no idea what we're talking about, Yesik is a series of videos that we did. Yesik is my alter ego girlfriend. And she is a Latina who just kind of believes everything that is said by, the abuelitas and all that kind of stuff. And but basically one of the series that we did was on eating too late at nighttime, that if you eat anything past 7, that's going to be turned immediately into fat. The premise behind that is because, and it makes sense, when you look at it that way, because you're not very active when you go to bed. So what you consume, quote unquote, gets turned into fat. Now, that's a myth that we hear all the time. Thoughts?
So excess calories is what usually turns to fat, number one.
Mm-hmm.
So the timing of meals doesn't really matter. Yeah, I mean, that's what I always tell people, is that's not true. However, it could be that at that time where you should just be going to sleep, where you tend to like raid the cabinets or like eat a little bit extra, and that's where the excess calories might be coming from. So you might benefit by not eating late at night just to help you stay in that caloric deficit if you're trying to achieve weight loss or even maintenance if you don't want to be in excess.
Yeah, I agree. Antonio?
100% agree. But here's something that happens too, right? Like what happens if you have someone that works out at night, right? Mm-hmm. There's someone that, because I've worked with people that do midnight shifts. So they work from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. So what do you tell them to eat if they heard someone say can't eat after 7? It's like, what? You're not eating? Like, and these people are police officers. So imagine you have someone not eating from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and they get attacked by someone, like they're not going to be in their best state. Number one. Number two, so knowing what their physical activity is, and then what are you going to eat? I actually have some people that I ask them to eat before bed because the next day I know they have a heavy workout and they may not want to eat before workout. So having some extra calories for that next day to make sure they're their best really does help them.
Yeah.
You know, so I love to eat before bed, especially if it's a cookie with milk. Sometimes that's what I have my clients do, or like a milkshake. And I know that sounds crazy, but hey, sometimes you got to find what works for the people you work with. And if you tell them to stay away from it, they'll probably do it more.
Yeah, what I tend to see often is, and the way I explain it to many people as well is like nighttime is a moment where like your body's kind of sending you the receipt of all the how active you were in the day, and there's, you know, we live in the US, and you know, we're in a go type of mode all the time, specifically those people that live in bigger cities and things like that, and they just don't prioritize fueling or getting enough food throughout the day or high quality good food. So obviously at nighttime is your body goes into that mode and says to you like, hey, listen, you haven't really given me enough food. You're having pretty darn active today. So how about we, like, you know, crank up your hunger levels and let's just obviously go to town. So this is a time where, you know, people usually, like, their emotions get, you know, they take over, and then that emotional response with that physiological need paired up together, they just lead to overeating and binging and eating too much of many different things. This is what happens, honestly, with the breakfast skippers that don't know how to control their food intake throughout the day. Like, nighttime becomes the time where they sit down, watch TV, be inactive, and eat. So it's not the fact that, and obviously when you see like you're gaining too much weight and all that stuff, you attribute it to the fact that you're eating too much before bedtime. It's not just that. It's just because you're eating way too many calories. You're creating a surplus late at night. And then with that, you're obviously gaining weight. That's obviously the part of the process, but it's just not because of the timing. It's just because that's most of the time that usually you experience that kind of stuff.
It goes back to, like, earlier I was saying how that person thought that the problem was her snacks, but really the problem was not eating enough carbs with her meals. A lot of people think nighttime snacking is the problem, but really it's because you're not eating enough during the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree. So I think it just all depends on the situation for many people. But and I think I agree with you, Antonio. Like what you mentioned about like having people fuel themselves like late at night, like when they're having early workouts. I say, you know, carb up, you know, and that's a good time. And some people are like, what? You're telling me to eat a lot of carbohydrates at nighttime? So there is a not truth behind this, but obviously when you load up on carbohydrates and obviously you load up your glycogen stores, your body's obviously going to go for that first, like obviously for your glycogen stores before going into like using fat as like, you know, or oxidizing fat as the main source of fuel. So the truth, there is like some truth as far as that. However, the problem is people tend to or not see like, okay, are you truly in a calorie deficit? And that's a part of it people don't really understand because they just fail to see what that even means. You know, so that's why me as a macro-based coach, that's a part of it that I try to, you know, help my clients create awareness around that. Like, you know, Antonio as a behavioral based coach is more about going to be, and I think you do some of this stuff too, Tony. It's more about how do you organize your food to create that deficit without necessarily counting anything, but just kind of like going by your own hunger cues to allow your body to really kind of listen to itself and make the proper decisions to create it. So those are going to be important ones.
Also, if you don't eat anything after 7 and you decide to get freaky that night, you're going to be depleted on your fuel stores. You're not going to be your best self for your partner.
Yeah. That's a very
carb up.
It's all about that. You know, it's all about the bigger picture. That's what you need to take away from all this.
And stay hydrated.
Yeah, that's a big one. We have another myth in here, which is actually, I'm just going to read it directly from here. It says, fresh is more nutritious. And it just kind of talks more about fresh produce versus frozen versus canned products. A lot of times people They obviously think fresh is better. You know, they kind of stay away from the canned, and then they say frozen is not as good. So what are you guys' thought between the differences that exist between all those three?
Well, I mean, with that belief, what ends up happening is then people don't buy vegetables because they don't have time to cook them or prepare them. And then they go for convenience items, like chips and whatever, and like all the things, like ordering in and whatever. But if they would stock up on like frozen veggies in their freezer and canned vegetables with just no salt added or something like that, like they would be fine. Because actually the nutrition content is higher in frozen foods and even canned foods because they're usually picked in frozen or picked in cans to preserve that freshness. But that also doesn't mean that fresh isn't nutritious as well. It's just you're actually probably going to have more of a higher nutrition content in frozen or canned vegetables only because of the fact that, like, say for example, I wanted your oranges, Florida oranges, which are amazing. And I actually used to have my grandparents used to live in Florida and they used to ship them to us and I love them. But by the time they actually get picked from the tree, shipped over, and then say they went to the grocery store and then I had to buy them and then bring them home, like that is over time, they're losing the amount of vitamin C that I'm going to need. Not to say it's still not going to be a great source of vitamin C. It's not going to be so super good for me. But if it was, say, picked, peeled, frozen, and then, you know, I bought it that way, it's actually going to have a higher vitamin C content because it was preserved.
Yeah. So I guess it depends on the situation too. And yeah, I agree. We love frozen vegetables here because, and it's what happens. People don't buy them because they goes bad. They don't have time to prep it. And they're just like, I'm not going to waste all my money buying, like, you know, fresh vegetables when I just don't have time to take them. But then I'm not going to buy frozen or canned because they're not good for me. So what does that leave you to? Like, no consumption of vegetables. So
yeah,
you got to pick the better option. What are your thoughts, Antonio?
I hate when I go to the grocery store and I buy spring mix, and then after like 3 days, I have to throw it away because it looks nasty.
Yeah.
So I'm all about frozen, right? Time, it takes 5 minutes. I throw it in the microwave, heat it up, got my veggies ready to go. I do love fresh, and I was at a point when I was one of those people before I studied nutrition. I was a clean eater, so I would only eat vegetables that were fresh, and it took so much of my time, and I'd always focus on that as opposed to I'm getting veggies in. Right? So as long as it's not canned, like Toni said, with a lot of salt, or if it's a fruit that's canned with a lot of sugar, or sometimes even the frozen fruit, they load it up with syrup. So always making sure that you're choosing the fruit that's just frozen.
Yeah.
And they have more nutrients. So those are the things that I love. So I love fresh, but I also love frozen and canned. It's all about what is more important to you, what are your priorities, and how you can make it work within your schedule.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And here's some, sorry to interrupt, Toni. I wanted to just kind of share some of the science.
We're like virtual.
Geez, thanks for interrupting, Andres.
She's about to drop a bomb.
Yeah. No, I'm just gonna read out some science part of frozen products and canned produce, like specifically vegetables, and the main difference that exists, and they mention in here that frozen produce is generally vine ripened before undergoing minimal processing prior to freezing. So most vegetables and some fruits undergo blanching in hot water for a few minutes prior to freezing in order to inactivate enzymes that may cause unfavorable changes in color, flavor, smell, and nutritional value. So those are like the main differences. Now with canned, there is a little bit more processing that goes into it because they tend to undergo some forms of they're adding some things like nitrates in some cases just to that may break down some of the essential nutrients. However, and this is literally what they quote in here. They say cooking is just another form of processing, and different ways of cooking always going to affect the nutrients, like the content and the bioavailability of some of those nutrients. So by those standards, by that argument, we should just be eating things like straight out of the tree and straight raw. So it's not realistic, of course. So here's all to say that you can eat your vegetables however you want them, as long as you eat them at the right time. Now, if you're a person that you don't have the time to cook fresh vegetables, you don't have that availability, then buy frozen or buy canned, because you're still going to get nutrition from it. Maybe not the 100% nutrients of it, regardless of the type, but then you're still going to get them. And I think that's important, better than getting none at all.
It's better than not eating them. And I'll say what I do is I usually, because like what Toni said, I'll buy like lettuce and it'll go bad in a couple days and I'll be really annoyed and I wasted my $3 on like a bag of lettuce. I'm like, why? So what I tend to do is I actually will get enough to like last for like a few days, and then I'll like stock up on frozen vegetables to like take me through the rest of the week. So I don't have to like, I just cook vegetables, get me through a couple of days each week, and then at the end of the week I resort to my freezer.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So I think that's obviously, again, it's a myth. You don't necessarily have to, pick only fresh. You can do frozen, you can do canned, as long as what works best for you as far as preparation, and as long as you consume it. I think that's a bigger part of it too.
Can I go on to the next myth?
Yes.
Please. No, Toni. Geez, Please. What does this look like?
It has to be organic.
Okay, that's a good one. So obviously building up on the previous one of obviously like the freshness of the products, let's talk about organic. So what are your thoughts?
Well, does anyone want to take it?
Well, I thought it was funny because I was talking to someone about this the other day. They're like, it's organic. It should actually be cheaper because they don't have to buy the chemicals for anything. And they're literally just sprouting it and letting it be, as opposed to actually taking care of it. So shouldn't it be cheaper? So number one, why is it more expensive if you're not spending all this extra money, like trying to take care of it, right? Like you're not adding any of the GMOs, genetically modified organisms. However, I just buy whatever. If you can get organic, great for you, but it's not going to make you reach your goals quicker. It's not going to make you the healthiest person in the world. At least that's just my stance on it. Just especially when it comes to veggies, just go after and get your veggies, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to that term clean eating and obviously picking things that are organic because they're quote unquote cleaner. Now there are like the biggest like reason why many people go for organic products, particularly vegetables and fruit, is because of the fact that they use pesticides and things like that in their crops when they're growing them. Now, here's the thing: in order for pesticides and some of those things are a necessary evil when it comes down to growing crops, because that's the way that we are. We're able to be fed, and we have like produce and grocery stores. Now, some of those pesticides are considered like natural and some of them are just not. Now, there are going to be some chemicals in that, but at the same time, usually they're not like, the research is clear that it's not necessarily something that is like necessarily harmful. It's not something that is going to be depriving you of your achieving your goals, like Antonio said. And I don't personally buy organic. There are some things, like I think that there's like, they call it like the dirty dozen and like the clean 10 or something like that. Again, those are like the products or like the vegetables and fruit that have the most amount of pesticide residue on top of them. That's another big too. Like if you're just too worried about buying and getting pesticides in your food, just peel the freaking fruit, for example, if you're getting fruit. Seriously, that's where like the pesticide residues are going to be, not inside. So maybe that's another way that you don't have to necessarily buy organic, but then you can still get the organic benefits, so
even if you wash them, it'll take some of that residue off. And and yes, going on to that, like the skin usually what has it, but also the skin also has fiber. So I always tell people it's a personal preference. Like I think we have 3 registered dietitians on here who eat conventional fruits and vegetables. I think that says a lot. Not that you want to like,
and we're alive.
Obviously, we're alive. We're really healthy. We stay up to date on the research. Like, we realized, like, I'd rather put my money into, like, taking fitness classes. Like, I was like, don't need that extra. Like, you could literally, your grocery bill could be double if you choose to do everything organic. It just tends to be, like, $1 more for everything. But so don't waste your money. If you are going to buy organic, don't waste your money on things that have a peel that you're not eating the peel. So like organic bananas, organic oranges, like you're peeling them. So it's not going to be on the inside. So that's number 1. And number 2, if you just wash it really well, that's totally fine. Because we do want to actually eat the skin. So if you are going to buy, say, like organic apples, that would be good if you don't trust the skin of a conventional one, because of the sense that like we do want the fiber.
Yeah. So I think it also comes out to like doing like just eating less processed. It's funny when I see people like, well, I bought some organic Pop-Tarts. Or
oh yeah. No, I was at a party.
I bought some organic like Cheetos. I don't even know, but
well, no, this is a really good example. Like I'll never forget this. I think I had like just become a dietitian, and it was like innocently, I was at a family barbecue, and like a cousin had come over to me, and they're like, I hadn't seen in a while. She's like, you're gonna be so excited. We're making margaritas, and I'm putting it with organic lemonade. And I was like,
hey, there you go.
Let's backtrack.
It was organic sugar, organic lemons.
So it was Tony's.
Partying it up, organic margaritas all around. That's gonna make it way healthier.
So, but here's like that's like if you want a lesson about organic, like that, like and how organic doesn't necessarily mean good for you. It's like, okay, lemonade obviously has lots of sugar, whether it's organic sugar or regular sugar, it still has sugar, which is not great in excess. If you're gonna have any fruit organic, the lemons have that peel, like I was saying. So like that's like the last type of vegetable or fruit
that you eat.
That you don't even eat it, like you squeeze it. So so that was just like an example that like I'll use that example all the time.
Yeah, there's so many food products that have like the organic stamp, which by the way, it's something that companies need to pay money for. And once you have it, like you can increase like your retail value of it, so you can sell it for more expensive because people want the organic stamp on it. You can get organic Pop-Tarts, organic cereal. Does that even make sense? It's most like the ingredients that they were sourced with supposedly, have the organic seal stamp of approval.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really, it kind of defeats the purpose. Like the main goal in all this is just going to be to just stick to the basics and favor whole foods. And that's going to be the main goal out of all this.
Yeah.
We do have a very late comer into the podcast that we are just recording now. His name is Dezi, and he's an asshole for coming in so late. No, I'm just kidding, bro.
Thanks for showing up, bud. Dude, I don't like it in a text group. He's like, did anyone say mustard? 4 hours later.
You're not going to make it to the show notes. I'm sorry.
Damn it.
Well, but welcome to the show, Dezi. Dezi is a dietitian out of Arizona. He has a big movement to helping dads improve their self-confidence and crushing their goals. Dezi, welcome to the show. You've been here before, man. What's going on?
What's up, man? I'm so sad that I'm so late, but so happy that I'm on this wonderful podcast, having combos with my favorite people in the whole wide motherfucking world.
Absolutely, man. You're going to be enjoying the last, the 30 seconds of it, so no worries.
Dude, Dezi, if I were you, I'd have put in my plug immediately, been like, find me at Fit Dad's Coach, since he's not going to put me in the show notes.
Meta Purpose Nutrition.
Plug it in.
See you guys later.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
I'm gonna edit that out. No, just kidding, dude. But
I love you guys. I'm sorry. Jeez.
Anyways, no, it's all good, bro. Thank you so much for coming in. We have been talking about nutrition myths, and we're just having a fun conversation and make it we're recording this whole thing into a podcast. So but anyway, so good. So I think we can probably agree that the truth behind organic is just that we don't have to get it. If you have the money to afford it, sure, just go by all means, but it's not necessary. So I think that's important. I do have one that I wanted to share here that I get all the time. And I know you guys work with a lot of active individuals. Which is, what was it? Like I lost it. Okay. To lose fat, you have to do cardio on an empty stomach, or you had to do like the quote unquote fasted cardio. So what are your thoughts on this? Dezi, happy for you to join us. How about you start us off on?
Yeah, maybe you could say something, Dezi.
You can contribute to something.
Hey, here we go. I'm gonna drop fire. Dude, this one pisses me off because if we're looking at performance just in general.
I really feel, Des.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at performance just in general. Obviously, we're looking at sports performance. So none of that says fasting right before. For me, it's one of the big emphasis that I try to make sure that I coach people through. And, even just athletes that are asking questions is first, like, what is working for you? And second, if we're looking at overall fat loss, then we're looking at calorie, reduction. We're looking at over time, what do your behaviors look like consistently? So this one right here, it's not my favorite. That's why I literally just kind of got pissed off.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good one. Who else wants to share something on this end?
I used to do it. I used to think it was like my go-to. I'm not a fan of it. I started to eat, and most of my clients, I try to have them eat something before a workout, and they tell me they feel 1,000 times better. And they still meet their fat loss goal, whatever that looks like. And I try to have them have some piece of fruit, a piece of toast, some sort of carbohydrate source to give them that energy. kind of going back to skipping breakfast, right? Like we were talking about fasting and all that fun stuff. If they're just someone who doesn't want to eat before workout, then we spoke about it. Just have some carbs at night. But if you like to eat and you feel a difference, then we would all probably highly suggest eat something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony?
I mean, food is fuel. So it gives you energy. I think it's all about, and this is a little bit more in depth, and which is why working with a coach is so helpful, but it's all about like timing and amount and what you have before and all of that. But, like I know some people tend to get a little bit sick or nauseous if they eat before they work out, so they feel better on it, but it goes back to what works for you. I know personally, like I would be able to maybe get through like something quick, but like a quick workout. But if it's anything like I'm taking like a long, like 1 hour class, I'm going to have a much better workout. I'm going to be in better mood. I'm going to have more energy. I'm going to hit more PRs. It's going to increase my confidence. I'm going to have a much better day in general if I feel like I had a really great workout rather than like being like dreading the whole thing. Like we don't just exercise just to lose weight. And if you do, please change your views on that, because it's like supposed to do so many other things and you can't enjoy it if you're feeling tired and hungry while you're working out.
Yeah, I agree. And now if we start to look at more from like the scientific standpoint, like it's like Dezi was saying, if you achieve a state of calorie deficit. So here's my thoughts on it. Like I personally, when we talk about, if I talk about specifically what works for me, I love to work out in a fasted state. I feel lighter and I feel better for specific types of workouts in which I'm not really exerting myself too much. Let's say, maybe like a CrossFit workout where I'm not lifting too heavy weights. Maybe for some people listening in, and a lot of people that listen to this podcast are CrossFitters. So maybe for something like a WOD, like doing, a quick type of workouts, it may actually feel a little bit better for you. I do have a lot of clients that work out at 6 a.m. and they, like you, Tony, said, like it's, they feel like too heavy on their stomach and may not be wanting to do it that way. So it all comes down to looking at the bigger picture in your day to day. So is it more effective to do like a fasted cardio versus non? It all depends on if you're creating a calorie deficit, there is some studies that show there's a slight deficit, but not many people have that level of control. If you're a person that has a huge amount of knowledge in nutrition, know how to track macronutrients the proper way, you know exactly how much you're consuming on a daily basis, and you incorporate that as part of like your routines to be able to achieve a specific goal, sure, like you can actually help. But for most people, specifically listening to this podcast and for most audiences, it's not going to be more effective than not doing it. You're still going to be able to accomplish your results, but you have to take care of the same things regardless whether you do it or not. I think those are the big goals. But just because you do it on an empty stomach, I think people are just thinking like, oh, like I am burning fat because there's just no food in my stomach. It doesn't work that way, buddy. It doesn't work that way.
And then kind of like how we were saying earlier, like sometimes people who don't eat breakfast tend to then overeat at night. Sometimes like you might do fasted cardio, fasted workout, and then you eat extra as a result because you didn't eat enough during the day. Like sometimes it's all goes back to habit and behavior and like cause and effect.
Yeah, I agree. So there you have it. That's a good one. I do have one here about supplements. So dietary supplements are necessary. What are your thoughts on this? Antonio, you talk about supplements often, so.
Yeah, they're not necessary at all. If anything, you need to make sure your food intake is right. You can't out supplement a bad diet, right? You can't, right? Oh, thank you, Dezi. Appreciate the bomb. And it's funny because Andres, you were just like, hey, Tony, what are your thoughts on it? And Dezi was like, wait, Tony just spoke. So as you know, there's two Tonys, right? Because he looked at you like, dang, dude, Tony just spoke. You got to be rude to him.
Antonio.
Antonio.
Yeah. So when it comes to supplements, there's a time and a place, but you got to get your diet in check first. Like if you're reaching for a supplement, it's not going to help you long term. It's funny because I just did like a live with a mental performance coach a couple months ago. And then I just saw he's going to start working with an MLM. And I'm like, seriously, dude, like, you know it's not going to work. I get it. You're trying to hustle. You're trying to make money. Good for you. But the more you keep pushing supplements, the more you're actually pushing people away to something that they actually need, which is getting their diet in check. So supplements are not necessary.
Anybody else?
I mean, I think they're necessary if you have a legitimate deficiency. I mean, and then you could argue most people aren't eating well, but it doesn't. It's not like it's not like a cover up for like you not eating well. Like it doesn't it's not the same. Like, you can't take a supplement and be like, oh, this is like me, eating my fruits and vegetables. Like, no, you still have to eat your fruits and vegetables. And so instead of wasting your money on supplements, you should put it into the grocery store.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of just to piggyback on what you all were saying right there. Castillo, I love what you had said where, like, people who are pushing supplements, you're actually pushing people away. We're learning a great deal of marketing and the things that we're doing now. I think that primarily when someone is pushing supplements, they already know that the market is going to favor towards them. And as professionals, we know, like, okay, well, it should be foods first type of thing. So we already know that that person is not as credible because it should be foods first. But kind of piggybacking on what you guys are saying, it's always foods. And there are some deficiencies, Toni, kind of like what you had said earlier about, like, if they do have legitimate deficiencies, then they might need it. But I love, Castillo, what you said. I say it all the time. You can't out supplement a really imbalanced diet.
Yeah.
And for me, it goes back to, like, okay, well, let's look at behaviorally what is going on and why you need these supplements and what you are actually searching for. More often than not, they're just searching for, more guidance and more confidence in what they're doing, which from a marketing perspective, supplements have sent that message.
And I think also, the way I see it is they're not necessarily, but they can help fill important gaps. And we live in the 21st century where, technology allows us to get, and I'll talk about, the difference between, like, whole foods for, like, specific nutrients versus synthetic things. And I'll explain a couple of things that I read today that I thought was really interesting. But I do think we live in a population in which sometimes as jobs as practitioners in nutrition is to make sure that we correct a lot of issues, as soon as possible that may actually cause some, health issues. Like, for example, like, I supplement all my clients mostly when I know the levels with vitamin D. I know Antonio is, like, deficient. I'm deficient. It's like, a typical thing. So vitamin D is something that you don't get much from food sources. And some people even get a lot of sun exposure, which is, the natural source of it. And still they struggle with deficiencies. Like omega-3s is something many people get access to as much fish as they should. And they have a diet that is mostly predominant in omega-6s. So again, there's so many different things in which supplementation can help fill important gaps. So I wouldn't necessarily say that supplements are necessary, but supplements can be, a really important addition to a whole foods diet. And I think that's the important part. But what I wanted to share too is, like, because, like, there's a claim that says obviously natural whole foods are always going to be better than synthetic supplements. And that's hands down the most important thing. But what I was actually seeing here is, like, there are some compounds that are more effective in a supplemental form. And one of them, for example, that I read here this morning was curcumin and turmeric. Because on its own, when you actually grab, like, turmeric and you get it from, like, let's say the shaker, whatever, like the spice, your body doesn't really absorb it well unless, again, you take it with maybe some black pepper or something like this. But then when you take it in what's called as a liposomal form or supplementing with black pepper extract, your body can absorb it a lot more radically better. So in this, for the sakes of this argument, this specific supplement is going to be better than the one that's coming directly from food sources or whole food sources. So in some cases, that is going to be something that a lot of people don't know, but they may benefit from. Now, is curcumin or turmeric an essential nutrient that you need to have on a daily basis? Not necessarily, but it can benefit you tremendously. But it's just something to think about when it comes down to supplementation, and that people really need to know and be aware about. It's not necessarily that they're bad. It's just in some cases, it could be really helpful to include them on top of a whole foods approach.
Yeah, on top of a whole foods approach. And just to go back to what we were saying earlier, just because that's great, you still want to read with the recommended doses. So don't double up on something because you hear that it's good. And I'm just only saying that because I actually take a curcumin supplement for, like, anti-inflammatory stuff. And I didn't know this, but not that I did it, but another dietitian I was working with, she, like, helped me. She's like, just be mindful because, like, if you have double the dose, you'll probably end up getting heartburn. Like, random thing. Like, I didn't know. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, well, maybe.
Yeah, there's so many details. There's so much stuff that we don't know.
So just be mindful when it comes to supplements. Like, always read the labels and make sure that it has that NSF stamp or it's been tested in a facility where we know that actually what's inside of it actually says what's in it, because supplements are not regulated by the FDA.
Yeah. So that's the key things for all of us to remember.
Mhm.
Cool. So I think we cover a good amount of them. I wanted to finish this off with talking a little bit more about like misinformation and mainstream media, and because this is usually how a lot of these myths are generated. So I guess like for you guys as dietitians and practitioners, what are some of like the recommendations for people that run into nutritional myths as they start the new year, because they're going to, and a lot of times there's not going to be an Antonio or a Tony or a Dezi or me that is going to be there in the forefront, telling them like, hey, listen, this is not, you need to take a step back. So what would be something or maybe some strategies that you can maybe tell people listening to this podcast as far as like interpreting or when they're reading some of that information in mainstream media, like social media, like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those different things, what would you tell them? Like, what are some of the things that people would need to know beforehand?
I mean, I'll kick this one off. I think overall the power of connection and networking is huge. I mean, I was actually talking to Castillo about this a couple months back, and I was like, man, I don't have time to read all of these studies. Like, there's no way. Like, I get overwhelmed with trying to consume that type of content. And I loved it because he had said, well, why not connect the people with the experts in that field? Why not do lives with the experts in that particular field? And so, and it's something that I've been doing, which is connecting them to people where it's like, this person is an expert in this area, even on social media, like here is their account. And the other thing too, we've talked about this a couple times, just throwing them like Healthline, like these Healthline articles. I mean, they do a substantial amount of citing what they're talking about. And then just, from there, asking for some guidance from a coach like ourselves or another professional in the field that can help with their individual needs, because the education is out there. It's the application that people need some guidance with.
I agree 100%. Anybody else wanted to share anything on this?
Well, I mean, I think that hopefully everyone who's listened got some stuff taken away from here. Like, we're not going to do like crazy detoxes. We're not going to just buy supplements and think that's the answer. We're not going to get rid of, restrict carbohydrates, all those things. So now if you're following someone on social media that's telling you to do these things, I think that's a clear sign that that's not somebody that you want to take advice from. I think that I always, and kind of also saying what Dezi, what you were saying was like connecting to other professionals. I think personally, if you really vibe with someone and you read through their content and they seem like they are genuine, they want what's best for you, like they're not just like, here, buy my shake, like, and just like DM you, like, like I think that's good. If you can see yourself like, if this person, like you have a connection with them, like that's something I think that says a lot. I think that's going to help you to take better advice from someone when you feel like you can actually talk to them and it's not just like here, buy this.
Yeah. Tonio?
Repeat what they said. Ditto. Just loving it all. And I mean, there's not much else to say because.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of wrap this up on this note, and I feel as you start this new year, there's and I posted about this the other day, is the definition of insanity is wanting to do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And every time that you read any of these headlines or read any of these myths, you need to cut that out, or do this or that. It's more of the same thing that you're doing every single year, and again, expecting a different result. So before you jump on the gun on anything that you read, whether it's social media, influencers, whatever may be the case, even non-influencers, even some professionals that sometimes may put out information that are just more slightly biased. I always take the stand of neutrality. I always take the stand of like being neutral in any kind of position, not necessarily favoring vegan, but also not necessarily going against it, not necessarily favoring keto, but not necessarily going against it. There's always what's going to work best for you. And you need to obviously take the stance of, protecting what's better for you. And at the same time, getting information from reputable sources. And, that's probably going to lead to the question, well, what are reputable sources? Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of times it's really difficult to find them.
Yeah.
So, well, you have 4 of us in here that, we would consider ourselves reputable resources. So plug in there Antonio Castillo, plug in there Dezi Abeyta, plug in there Toni Marinucci.
I thought Dezi wasn't going to be in the show notes, so just us 3,
hey,
right?
dude, I made it. All right, I provided 2 things on hand.
Yeah, he provided a couple things. So yeah, he got this ticket into the show notes, so we're good. You're definitely going to look you up to your stuff, man. So appreciate that you coming in. But yeah, man. So I think those are they're gonna be the main things. We all want to look better, to feel better. That's that's one of the most biggest desires of us as human beings, and we're gonna do anything in our power to be able to make that happen. But if there's anything that I learned, in my 5-6 years as a dietitian, is the fact that nothing is going to breed success more than consistency and sustainability. And it's not something sexy. It's not something as cool and exciting as doing a detox or a 30-day program. But at the end of the day, that is what it's going to give you the results that you want, and I think all of you 3 also agree with this. And, any of those myths and crazy things that sometimes I have even fell prey to, I'm not going to lie. There's going to be times that I change my views as a dietitian, to do certain things because I read them somewhere, even from quote unquote reputable sources. And I'm like, well, maybe I have been, doing things wrong all this time, so those are things that, for people listening to this, you had to be wary of where are you getting your information from, and making sure that you take a step back every time you are, inclined to do something, just jump in the gun trying to achieve a specific result because of that. So
100%, dude.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your time in this impromptu episode. Dezi, thank you so much for your 30 seconds on. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
I love you. I'm sorry.
But yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Of course, if you can, well, maybe you guys can just talk briefly how can people find you, how can people reach out to you, and if you are got something big going on right now, like Toni, book, TED Talk, all these different things. Of course, make sure you.
He has a TED Talk too.
Yeah, I know.
We've already talked about it.
Yeah.
Whoa! Big time,
guys. So why don't we just kind of go around the room and then just maybe tell everybody what you got going on and where can people find you. Toni, ladies first.
Okay, so you can find me at tips_with_Toni. That's Toni with an I on Instagram or Facebook. If you want to learn more about, obviously, how to break up with diets and just commit to healthier living, but if you want to hear about the TED Talk, you will be able to watch it live. I just found out. It's on February 13th. Yeah, you're going to be able to watch it live. And also, I'm in the middle of writing a book, and the book and the TED Talk are all about the correlations between dieting, dating, and relationships. So it's a really interesting spin on how we treat them both the same. And I'll just give you a sneak little peek of how I'll tell you I'm a nutrition expert, but I'm not a dating expert. However, there's lots of trial and error. I think I figured it out. I was so good at to talk about my story, and that's what I'm also writing a book. That's what the book's going to be about. So.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely make sure that we add all those links and even the how to watch this thing live. I'm
just going to put the link in my Instagram.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah. Well, make sure you guys give a follow to Toni in there. Antonio, other Toni in here.
What is up? Yeah, at Coach_Toni Castillo on Instagram. You can find me on my Facebook group, Team NFP, N for nutrition, M for 4, and the P for performance. What do I got going on? 2020, just another great year. I'm going to bring some more Captain Hydrate. If you haven't already, go check out the video series. It's just how to stay hydrated, some simple misconceptions you may have on how hydration affects your performance. And the last one was with my arch nemesis, Mr. Dihydrate, and how alcohol affects your performance. So, and there's also Yesik, which I do with Andres, which I just figured out he's doing the same thing over and over again. So I know I eat before I go to his house since he does fasting. So I always go expecting all right, we're going to eat something that GB made. And I'm just starving. And I have to film Yesik just dehydrated and hungry. So thank you, Andres. Now I know to eat before. So Fine is doing some Yesik as well.
Awesome. Great. Good to know. Dezi.
Absolutely. So on IG at Fit
Okay, that's
Dad's
enough.
Coach.
I'm just kidding.
And you don't get the rest. Dad Nutrition Expert. You can find me also in my Facebook group, Men of Purpose Nutrition. We're just a bunch of men really trying to uphold one another and see each other win. Big projects I got coming up. This 2020 is in March. I'll be speaking at South by Southwest.
Nice.
Talk title is Today's Dad, Disconnected Until Purposeful. So
Nice.
I'm super excited to be able to launch that. It's going to be a lot about my story and my father, and so it's going to be a lot of hard work. But my big thing is if you're sharing, then you're being courageous. So let's go.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. You will we'll make sure we add the links, including yours, Dezi, on the show notes, so you guys can maybe connect and hopefully you found this podcast helpful. If you did, make sure you leave us a review so we show up a little bit more on search bars and things like that, and you can hear from evidence-based practitioners, registered dietitians, and nutrition experts here on Vive Nutrition Radio. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I will see you guys in the next one. Hey, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Vive Nutrition Radio. I wanted to ask you a quick favor. If you enjoyed this episode or if you enjoyed the podcast altogether, make sure you subscribe and leave us a review so we increase our visibility and we continue to reach more people and change their lifestyle through nutrition, performance, fitness, and health. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys on the next one.